So for that, I'm
well, workout's a big thing, and we actually haven't talked to that many workout experts, at least in commercial real estate. I mean, there's
I think they have a panel right now, actually, that's ongoing. As soon as we finish, I want to go in and hear what they have to say.
You know, and it's interesting because I think there's some kind of a line here between attorney and workout specialist, and I should say workout practitioner.
Yeah.
And really, it's a very fine line. There's very few attorneys that we've ever worked with that have the business acumen that can look at it's almost whole brain, right brain and left brain. You've got to be able to look at the problem from 10,000 feet and then almost in the next instance go dive bomb into the details.
Right.
I think one of the reasons why we've gravitated to Marc, I mean, he's an excellent lawyer, but he does bring another discipline of, I think you have an MBA, and so he brings a businessman perspective to deals because, and that was one of the issues we were talking about on the panel today. It's one thing to look at it through the perspective of being an attorney and a high-profile and high-powered attorney and say, this is the way we've typically done it. I'm not saying they're not creative, but it's an entirely another way to take an inverse look at an unusual strategy, and I think that's, you can't understate that enough in this business.
Right.
Being able to go on both sides of that line, to be able to say, I'm looking at it from the business, I'm looking at it from lender's perspective, and I understand it. It's really apprehension and comprehension.
And it's interesting you should say that because most of the workout specialists I've met that own the companies, they're not lawyers. They use lawyers.
They use lawyers.
Right.
Well, the distinction that I've seen, and I get referrals from workout specialists that are not lawyers, is they're generally working with folks who are not solvent in the event that they get hit on their guarantees. So they're putting together, in effect, bankruptcy analyses and telling the bank, look, if you really push this person to the limit, this is what their financial situation is going to look like. Effectively, you're going to push them into bankruptcy anyway, and therefore you're better off settling for pennies on the dollar. Whereas I represent people who have more than enough resources to satisfy the
That was going to be one of my questions. Do you have to be a hardship case?
Well, the answer is you can't be a hardship case to work with me. So it doesn't really serve your benefit, and it doesn't really serve my needs. So you have to be someone who's rather substantial, who's being called upon and could, if things don't go your way, satisfy.
But think about how significant that is for a second. Because the guy doesn't have much to lose, doesn't have much to lose, but the guy who's got a tremendous amount to lose. I mean, Marc, how many guys have you got off on large guarantees, or how many groups have you worked with where you could successfully say, you were successful in that ability? And
a number.
Okay.
A number. And Brian had mentioned earlier that it might be helpful to give you an example.
Yes.
And I'm happy to give the example that I gave today during my talk. And that is, I represented an individual who was the equity in a sponsored condominium development. So they had obtained a construction loan, went out, acquired the property as part of the loan. The loan required that they remove the tenants from the apartment building, demolish the building, and then start their condominium project. Apparently, there were significant delays in getting the tenants out of the property, and the project didn't start for about 8 months, until about 8 months after the anticipated commencement date.
Okay.
Well, the issue became, well, if you started 8 months late, you were likely to finish at least 8 months late, but the loan was not restructured at the time that the lender made the first construction disbursement. So it ensured that there was going to be a problem on the back end. Now, there were a series of extensions, but this was the first step in what became a very difficult situation for the borrower. Then, over time, the lender allowed the sponsor to reallocate monies from contingency to the G&A line item, and actually funded about 230% of what G&A was supposed to have been, general administrative expenses, at the beginning of the project, at the point that the project was 65% complete. So They should have received 65% at most.
Right.
Instead, they received 230%. If you did the mathematics on that, you'd have to multiply by 1.5 times to get to what they would have drawn if they got to 100% completion. Well, if you're the financial partner in that transaction, right, you're not involved in the day-to-day operations, you're going to be a little bit upset.
I would
You're
think.
going to be upset at the sponsor, and you're going to be upset at the lender for having done that. Well, we evaluated the situation, and we presented our position to the lender. We were very successful. Ultimately, we ended up getting the financial partner off of his guarantee with a roughly $6 to $7 million exposure for nothing.
Very good. So when does somebody know that it's time to call Marc?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I think the earlier they call, the better.
Wouldn't it start with,
And-
I mean, you do transactions, right?
Well,
I mean,
in the case I just, clearly the transactional part, but in the case I just mentioned, we got involved with removing the sponsor. So we were involved very early on. Then we installed the equity partner as the manager, and then we were intimately involved in the negotiations with the bank from that point forward. I think that had a lot to do with why we had such a successful result. Having said that, I mean, many people contact us after they get sued, and they actually get served with a lawsuit.
Does it ever become too late?
Well, that's an interesting question as well. And I might have an answer for you in a couple of days. Somebody contacted me recently, and they're very, very deeply into the litigation, and they've answered the complaint, and they've already submitted responses to discovery. There's summary judgment motions pending, and I'll let you know in a few days.
but I want to add, I think there's a psychological component, because there really is. When you're in distress and the world's, it moves. When it goes up, it goes slow, but when it goes down, it spins on a dime. And I think being able to not drink your own Kool-Aid and being able to come to the realization that, you're going to, the best person to call is your lender right away when there's a problem. And it's not just because I'm a lender, I'm a borrower as well. And I've been in distress situations like everybody else over the last couple of years.
Well, you guys spoke with Sam Freshman, and we just spoke to him.
Yes.
And he was talking about the denial factor.
Right.
They're not thinking that there's the problem. They're somehow going to get out of it. Some miraculous thing is going to happen, or maybe if they just put their head in the sand, it'll go away.
Right. Well, but lenders have supported that as well by allowing extensions to take place and not wanting to address the fundamental.
Right.
Exactly. They haven't wanted to address the fundamental issues.
Right.
And then one day they wake up and something precipitated a need to move immediately.
I remember in 2007, I was still doing some development, and I knew in August I was going on vacation, and I knew right then that we were in for a major, major problem. The implosion of Countrywide, and all of my lender friends over at the large institutions were slowing down and stopping lending. Spreads were increasing. A lot of people did stick their head in the sand. I was working as a consultant for a group that was trying to do a condo project, and working with them to negotiate with their lender on these are the early days of a discounted. When I say early, beginning of end of 2007, beginning of 2008. This is before we formed B&A, working with this group, but in essence, they just didn't believe that the day would come, and that day did come, and the property got taken from them, and and it's such a shame, because it's like being on the top of a building and watching two cars collide, and unless you've actually been there and you've gone through it, or you've been around it, I don't think you'll ever truly be prepared to accept it. So.
All right. Well, yeah. I remember talking about this before.
Oh, with you and I?
Yeah. Like you were, you pretty much figured it out. Everybody else I was talking to at the time was saying, "Oh, this can't last very long." But I remember talking to you, and you're like, "Oh, this is not good."
Yeah, but I do take a different view now. I mean, my view my view, I honestly thought it was going to be a depression. It was just so
So yeah,
bad.
well, it happened in what,
You know?
August 2008?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, August
it all started-
2007 actually was
2007,
when I was kind of saying, you know,
Yeah.
but again, this was just talking amongst friends
Right.
and trying to really, you know, close ranks. But I think today, you know, you've got a lot of the large institutions getting their machines back, the CMBS machines, and, you know, hiring those people, and you've got a lot of the equity firms. Debt is proliferated in the last 6 months, like I can't believe. I mean, we were one of the few lenders out there. Now it's, you know, it's really all over the place. So it seems to be, in that sense, it seems to be getting better where the money's flowing more. Now becomes the question of what have you taken away from the last couple of years?
Right.
You know, are you buying right? And what we heard, very interesting, we heard Stan Eisman say this morning, you know, if you're buying at today's price, what market is, in a quality asset, in a area that you can't, you know, go ahead and duplicate, he feels that it's the right buy.
Right.
You know, versus, let's say, chasing that 12 cap in Toledo.
Well, I think, and Michael Rosenfeld felt the same way.
Well, yeah, well, you know, he just bought quality stuff. So I would tend to agree with that, although I still like certain parts of the country, the major metro markets. I think that there's still a lot of good buys there, and I think that we have turned a major corner in the last, you know, 3 to 6 months,
Right.
just in terms of the deals that we're seeing, the deals that we're trying to purchase, and talking to all of my peers.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, last year went off, it was crazy because we were talking about sovereign debt overseas, and everything was bad. But would you guys agree that unemployment really does have to go up for things to start moving?
And we just had the conversation on talking to a syndicator in the lobby. He has me looking at a deal in
Unemployment's not going up, sorry.
what's
Going
that?
down. I see, go ahead. Unemployment's going up. Go ahead.
Oh, did I say unemployment going up?
No, I
Oh,
did.
you
I
did.
did.
Yeah, you meant unemployment going down. So the simple point I want to make is that he was talking about a multifamily asset in kind of infill Phoenix, and you know, it's, you know, everybody's bullish on different markets, and I said, well, I'm not as excited about that market as I am, let's say, Las Vegas. I think your drivers there, just in terms of a economic and job growth standpoint,
Right.
will probably come to Vegas before they come to the infill, you know, blue collar areas of you know, downtown Phoenix.
Right.
And until that happens, those big, massive multifamily complexes, yeah, the rents have got to increase. So only increase one way, and that's people able to pay those rent increases. So I think it's going to be quite a long time until we see that happening. And you know, caveat emptor, Marc expressed, buyer beware. You know, so I think unemployment is critical, crucial, and fundamental to what you're doing here.
Well, listen, I want to thank you guys. Brian Shniderson, it was good catching up with you.
Yeah, good seeing you again,
Yeah.
JW.
And Marc, I don't want to mess up your last name.
It's
sorry.
Benezra.
Benezra.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciated talking to you guys.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
This is JW Nigerian with the Commercial Real Estate Professional Investor Group and Commercial Real Estate Distressed Assets Association. And we're at the GreenPearl Distressed Real Estate Summit in Los Angeles, California. I really appreciate you guys coming. Have a great day. Bye.